The Krell commander Wrath Kor stared at the tactical display. 200 human warships were closing in from every direction. For a moment, the entire bridge was silent, because what they were seeing didn't make sense. The Coalition intelligence reports had claimed humanity only possessed a small defensive fleet, but the ships appearing on the screen told a very different story. Long, dark hulls, heavy railgun cannons, massive engine trails cutting through space, and they were moving with perfect coordination. The sensor officer spoke quietly. "Commander, the human fleet is accelerating." Wrath Kor clenched his claws. "How many ships remain operational in our fleet?" The officer quickly checked the numbers. 206 combat-capable vessels. Nearly a third of the Krell armada was already gone, destroyed by traps before the real battle had even started. Wrath Kor felt anger rising in his chest, but also something else, respect. The humans had prepared this battlefield perfectly. Still, the Krell were warriors, and they had not conquered half the galaxy by surrendering. Wrath Kor straightened. "All ships," he commanded, his voice echoing through the fleet communications. "Form attack formation. If the humans want a battle, we will give them one." Far away, inside the human command ship Aurora Watch, Commander Elena Vargas watched the Krell fleet reorganize. That a small smile appeared on her face. "They're brave," she said quietly. One of her officers nodded. "They're also trapped." Elena gave the final command. "Human fleet, engage." Space exploded into motion. Human warships surged forward. Their railguns fired first. Massive metal projectiles launched at incredible speeds, slamming into Krell ships before their shields could fully recharge. One Krell cruiser lost its entire front section. Another ship's engines shattered from the impact. The Krell fleet fired back. Plasma cannons lit up the darkness of space. Bright explosions flashed between the two fleets. For a moment, the battlefield looked like a storm of fire. But the humans had one advantage: position. The Krell fleet was still surrounded by asteroid fields, mine networks, and automated defense platforms. Every time a Krell ship tried to maneuver, more human weapons opened fire. Missiles streaked across space. Drone swarms returned to attack damaged vessels. Railgun platforms fired from hidden positions. The Krell fleet was fighting not just an enemy fleet, but an entire weaponized star system that on the bridge of Dominion Spear. Alarms screamed continuously. "Commander, we are losing ships." Shields collapsing across multiple vessels. Enemy ships approaching from the rear. Wrath Kor watched the battle unfold. Ship after ship disappearing from the display. For the first time, the Krell armada was losing badly. The sensor officer spoke again. "Commander, human reinforcements detected." Wrath Kor's eyes widened. "More?" "Yes, another fleet entering the system." The holographic display expanded. Dozens more human ships dropped out of hyperspace near the edge of the system. Wrath Kor slowly leaned back. That he understood now. This had never been a desperate defense. This had been a carefully designed hunting operation. The humans had allowed the Krell fleet to enter the system, allowed them to move deeper, allowed them to believe the system was weak. And then they closed the trap. Wrath Kor looked around the bridge. His officers, the tactical display, the destruction spreading across the battlefield. Finally, he spoke. "Transmit surrender signal." The bridge went silent, but no one argued, because everyone could see the truth. The Krell armada had been defeated. Hours later, the battlefield was quiet again. Wreckage drifted slowly between the asteroids. Damaged Krell ships were being escorted away by human patrol vessels. Inside the Coalition Council chamber, the alien leaders watched the battle recordings in stunned silence. Commander Virex finally spoke. So the human ambassador was telling the truth. Another delegate nodded slowly. "I didn't need our help." The chamber doors opened. Ambassador Daniel Hayes walked inside calmly. He looked around the room. "So," he said with a small smile, "has the situation been resolved?" Commander Virex stared at him. "For a species that claims to be peaceful, you fight wars very efficiently." Daniel shrugged lightly. "We prefer peace." He paused. "But if someone insists on invading our home," his smile returned, "we make sure they never try it twice." And across the galaxy, the story of the Krell Armada's defeat spread quickly. From that day forward, the other civilizations of the galaxy remembered something important about humanity. They might look calm. They might look peaceful. They might even look harmless. But attacking humans in their own territory was the worst mistake anyone could make. On the bridge of the Krell Dreadnought Dominion Spear, chaos was spreading. Warning alarms echoed through the massive command hall as explosions flashed across the tactical display. Point one officer shouted over the noise, "Commander, we have lost contact with 12 ships." Another voice followed immediately. "Multiple cruisers reporting shield failure." Wrathcore slammed one of his claws against the command console. "Regroup the fleet," he roared. "Form defensive formation immediately." But the Krell fleet was no longer moving like a disciplined war armada. Ships were turning in different directions. Some were chasing drones. Others were trying to escape the asteroid field. And every second they wasted, more human weapons were activating. Far away, hidden behind a small gray moon, the human command ship Aurora Watch remained completely silent. Inside its control room, dozens of human officers watched the battle through holographic displays. Commander Elena Vargas stood calmly at the center. Her eyes moved across the tactical map. Hundreds of blinking lights showed the positions of the Krell fleet, and surrounding them, thousands of human defense units, drone swarms, missile batteries, railgun platforms. Everything was moving exactly as planned. A young officer spoke quietly. "Commander, Krell fleet attempting to reorganize." Elena nodded. "Of course they are." She studied the display for a moment. Then she gave the next order: activate the outer mine network. Back in the Krell fleet, the first mine detonated without warning. That a massive explosion ripped through the front of a Krell destroyer. The shockwave spread through nearby ships. Then another explosion followed, and another. Hidden throughout the system were thousands of cloak mines. They had been floating silently in space for months, waiting. Now they were waking up. The Krell ships tried to maneuver away, but every direction was dangerous. Move left, more mines. Move right, drone swarms. Move forward, missile platforms. Move back, railgun fire. The trap was tightening down on the Krell command bridge. Fear was beginning to spread. Point one officer shouted, "Commander, we are detecting human missile launches from multiple moons." Wrathcore turned sharply toward the display. Dozens of missile trails appeared across the hologram. Then hundreds. The missiles moved incredibly fast, leaving bright lines of light across the battlefield. "Intercept them." Wrathcore ordered. Point defense cannons opened fire across the fleet. Bright streams of energy filled space. Some missiles were destroyed, but many slipped through. Point one missile struck a Krell battlecruiser directly. The explosion tore the ship in half. Another slammed into a carrier's engine section. The entire vessel spun helplessly out of formation. Within minutes, more ships were gone. Back inside Aurora Watch, the human officers remained calm. Point one technician reported, "Krell fleet strength reduced by 30%. Another added, "Enemy formation completely broken." Commander Elena Vargas crossed her arms slowly. "Good." She looked toward the large holographic map of the system. The Krell fleet was now scattered, exactly where the humans wanted them. "Time for the next step," she said quietly. A communications officer turned toward her. "Commander, are we releasing them?" Elena nodded. "Yes." Across the system, several large objects suddenly powered on. Hidden deep inside asteroids and hollow moons, they had remained completely silent until this moment. Massive metal doors opened, and something began to move. Long, dark, and incredibly fast. Back on the Krell command bridge, the sensor officer suddenly froze. "Commander." Wrathcore turned. "What now?" The officer looked pale. "New contacts detected." "How many?" The officer hesitated. "Over 200. Wrathcore stared at the screen. "What kind of ships are they?" The answer came quietly. "Human warships." The holographic map zoomed in. For the first time since entering the system, the real human fleet appeared. They had been hiding the entire time, waiting, and now they were moving toward the trapped Krell armada from every direction. Wrathcore felt a cold weight settle in his chest, because he finally understood the full scale of the situation. The drones, the mines, the missiles, none of it was the main defense. Those were only tools to weaken the enemy. Slow them down. Break their formation. The real battle was just beginning, and humanity had been patiently waiting for this exact moment. Far beyond the council chamber, at the dark edge of the system, the Krell War Armada finally arrived. 300 massive warships slipped out of hyperspace one after another, their enormous hulls reflecting the cold light of distant stars. The lead dreadnought, Dominion Spear, moved slowly forward. Inside its command bridge, Supreme Commander Wrath Kor watched the system appear on the main display. A quiet murmur spread among the Krell officers. IT looked empty. Too empty. The system contained only a few scattered asteroid belts and a distant human colony world orbiting a small yellow star. Defense fleets, orbital battle stations, large military formations. Exactly what the Krell expected. Commander Wrath Kor let out a deep, satisfied rumble. So this is the famous human territory. One of his officers nodded. Our scanners confirm minimal military activity. Another officer added with amusement. It appears the coalition exaggerated their fear. More laughter spread across the bridge. Wrath Kor leaned forward slightly. Transmit a message to the human colony. The communications officer obeyed immediately. The message was simple. Surrender immediately. Your world will be spared. A few seconds passed. Then a reply arrived, but it wasn't what anyone expected. The message contained only a single sentence. Welcome to our system. That was IT. Threats. Negotiations. Just a welcome. Several Krell officers exchanged confused looks. Commander Wrath Kor frowned. Arrogant primates. He stood from his command seat, advanced the fleet. The enormous armada began moving deeper into the system. Hundreds of ships slowly spread into formation, their weapons systems powering up as they approached the human colony. For several minutes, nothing happened. Defenses, attack. The system remained quiet. Too quiet. One of the sensor officers suddenly spoke. Commander, detecting unusual radiation signatures in the nearby asteroid field. Wrath Kor glanced at the display. What kind of signatures? The officer hesitated. They appear artificial, but very small. Another officer interrupted. Probably mining equipment. Wrath Kor waved a dismissive claw. Ignore it. The fleet continued forward. They passed the asteroid belt. Still nothing. The colony world was now clearly visible on the display. Blue oceans, white clouds, a peaceful-looking planet. Prepare orbital bombardment, Wrath Kor ordered calmly. Before the weapons officer could respond, the first explosion happened. IT wasn't large. Just a small flash of light near the rear of the fleet. One Krell cruiser suddenly lost power. Then another explosion followed. Then another. Three ships disappeared in less than 10 seconds. The bridge fell silent. What just happened? Wrath Kor demanded. The sensor officer frantically checked his console. Commander, we are detecting multiple objects emerging from the asteroid belt. Hundreds of small signals suddenly appeared on the tactical display. They moved extremely fast, too fast. Drones, the officer whispered. Before Wrath Kor could respond, the drones attacked. Thousands of small human machines burst out from the asteroid field like a swarm of metal insects. Each drone carried a small but powerful explosive charge. They slammed directly into the Krell warships. Explosions began spreading across the fleet. A destroyer's engines detonated. A cruiser lost its shield generators. Another ship spun out of formation as drones tore through its weapon systems. The Krell armada instantly fell into chaos. Activate defensive cannons, Wrath Kor shouted. But the drones were everywhere. They came from every direction, from behind asteroids, from inside hollow rocks, even from hidden compartments buried deep within the asteroid field. That IT was an ambush, a massive one. That within minutes, more than 20 Krell ships were damaged. 5 were already drifting lifeless in space. Wrath Kor's claws dug into the command console. Where is the human fleet? He growled. Because something about this attack felt wrong. This was not a fleet battle. This felt like the opening move. The sensor officer looked up slowly. Commander, we are detecting additional signals. Where? The officer zoomed the display out. Everyone on the bridge froze, because now they could see it. The asteroid belt was not empty. Neither were the planetary rings. Neither were the nearby moons. Hidden human installations began activating across the entire system. Defense platforms, missile arrays, drone factories, automated railgun stations. Thousands of weapons suddenly powered online. The system itself had become a weapon, and the Krell fleet was sitting directly in the middle of it. Wrathcore stared at the tactical display in disbelief. For the first time in his long military career, he realized something terrifying. This was never meant to be a battle. That IT was a trap, and the Krell had just flown straight into it. Far away, on a small human command ship hidden behind one of the moons, a human officer calmly watched the battle unfold. Then he spoke into the communication channel. Phase 1 complete. He paused briefly, then gave the next order. Begin Phase 2. And across the entire star system, the real defense of humanity was about to begin. The silence in the council chamber grew heavier. Not the normal silence of a meeting where officials simply wait their turn to speak. This silence felt wrong. Commander Virex slowly leaned forward in his seat, his four eyes narrowing at the human standing in the center of the chamber. Ambassador Daniel Hayes, a single unarmed human, surrounded by the most powerful military leaders in the Orion Coalition. And yet somehow, he looked like the calmest person in the room. Virex tapped one of his claws against the metal table. Human, he said coldly, you have made a very bold claim. His voice echoed through the massive hall. You expect us to believe that your species could defend this system alone? Several alien delegates laughed quietly. One of them, a tall reptilian officer from the Varn Dominion, leaned forward with an amused hiss. Yes, the reptilian added. Your species has existed in the galactic community for barely 2 decades. Your fleet is small. Your military is untested. And yet you claim the Krell War Armada should fear you? More quiet laughter, but Daniel Hayes didn't react. Not with anger. Not with fear. He simply looked around the chamber, like someone studying a group of children arguing over something obvious. Then he spoke, and his voice was calm, almost relaxed. You're right. The chamber paused. Several delegates exchanged confused looks. Daniel nodded slightly. Our fleet is small. Our territory is new. And yes, compared to most of you, humanity arrived very late to this galaxy. Commander Virex tilted his head slightly. That wasn't the response he expected. Daniel continued. But you're making one mistake. He stepped closer to the center holographic display. With a small gesture, he activated it. The star map of the border system appeared above the table. Red markers representing the approaching Krell invasion fleet blinked slowly. Over 300 warships, one of the largest armadas the Coalition had ever seen. Murmurs spread across the chamber again. Daniel looked at the projection for a moment. Then he pointed at the approaching fleet. You see 300 warships, he said calmly. We see 300 targets. The room went completely silent. The reptilian officer stopped moving. Virex leaned back slowly in his chair. Daniel continued like he had simply stated a basic mathematical fact. The Krell have one major advantage. They have fought wars across half the galaxy. They believe experience makes them unbeatable. He paused. But experience can also create very dangerous habits. The hologram changed. Several new icons appeared around the Krell fleet. Unknown signals. The alien commanders frowned. What is this? One delegate asked. Daniel looked at them. Human strategy. The projection zoomed out. Small human ships appeared across nearby asteroid belts, hidden stations. Energy signatures buried deep inside planetary rings. The entire border system suddenly looked crowded, and none of the Coalition had noticed any of it. Commander Virex's claws slowly tightened against the armrest. How long, he asked slowly, have these assets been in place? Daniel gave a small smile. A few months. The reptilian officer slammed his tail against the floor. That's impossible. Our scanners monitor the entire system. Daniel shrugged slightly. You monitor the places where your species would hide military assets. Another quiet pause. But humans, Daniel added softly, have always been very good at hiding in places others ignore. The hologram shifted again. Now it showed possible movement patterns of the Krell fleet, every path they could take toward the planet, and on each path human traps, minefields, ambush points, automated drone swarms. Layer after layer, IT looked less like a defense and more like a carefully built hunting ground. Several alien officers suddenly looked uncomfortable because for the first time, they realized something disturbing. The Krell fleet wasn't entering a battlefield. They were walking into a maze. Commander Virex slowly exhaled. "You planned this," he said. Daniel nodded. "Of course." "But the Krell invasion only appeared 3 days ago," another delegate argued. "Yes," Daniel replied. "But we knew someone would try eventually." He folded his hands behind his back. When you grow up on a death world like Earth, you learn very quickly that survival is not about reacting. It's about preparing long before the danger arrives. The chamber fell silent again, but this time, no one laughed, because the calm human standing in front of them suddenly didn't look like a weak species asking for help. He looked like something far more dangerous, something patient, something that had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. And far away, on the edge of the system, the first Krell warships were already crossing into human space. They had no idea what was waiting for them, and soon they were about to find out. I've been tending bar at the Fractured Comet for almost 200 cycles. In that time, I thought I'd seen everything, every species, every kind of criminal, every possible way a quiet night could turn to chaos. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the night a human walked through my door, and my name is Krell. Before you ask, yes, I'm a Voxian .4 arms, black scales like polished obsidian, and eyes sharp enough to spot a fake credit chip from across the room. The Fractured Comet sits on the edge of the Terminus Belt. That is a polite way of saying we operate in the worst part of the galaxy. Out here, laws are more like suggestions, and morality, that is usually someone else's problem. That night started like any other. The usual crowd came in, smugglers whispering over secret deals, mercenaries drinking before their next contract, debt collectors hunting unlucky gamblers. The air smelled like burnt alcohol and engine coolant. Music pounded through the speakers with the subtlety of a reactor explosion that I was cleaning glasses with my lower left arm while mixing a drink for a heifer in the corner. Just another normal night. Then the door hissed open, and the human walked in. I had heard of humans. Everyone had. They had only joined Galactic Society about 50 of their years ago, but stories about them were already spreading across the stars. Stories about their death world. Stories about their strange psychology. Stories about how they could form emotional bonds with almost anything, but I had never actually seen one before. Not until that moment. He was not particularly large by galactic standards, maybe 2 meters tall, lean build, dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that showed absolutely nothing. He wore simple clothing, a jacket, a plain shirt, worn pants. Nothing about him looked special, and yet the entire bar went quiet, not silent. Just that strange kind of quiet where everyone suddenly focuses on their drink while secretly watching the newcomer. Every eye, every sensor, every antenna, all tracking him. The human walked straight to the bar, pulled out a stool, sat down calmly. Then he looked at me. "What do you serve that won't kill me?" he asked. His voice was calm, casual. The translator converted it perfectly into galactic standard. I blinked all 4 eyes. "That depends," I said. "What are you?" He raised an eyebrow. "Human." "Yes, I got that part," I replied. "I mean, what can your species metabolize without dying?" The human smiled. IT was not threatening, but human smiles always look slightly predatory. "Too many teeth." "Ethanol works," he said. "Anything with simple carbohydrates, too." "I'm pretty flexible." I grabbed a bottle of Turellian amber, poured a small amount into a glass. "This will probably not kill you," I said. "Probably." He sniffed the drink, then swallowed it in one smooth motion. In hesitation, he placed the glass down. Another. I poured. "You lost, human?" I asked. "No," he sipped the second drink slowly. "This is exactly where I meant to be." That should have been my first warning. Nobody comes to the Fractured Comet by accident. People only come here when they're either running from trouble or looking for it. Usually both. The human sat quietly, watching the room, the way predators watch their surroundings, calm, patient, alert. I kept 2 eyes on him while working, professional habit. Then 15 minutes later, the trouble arrived. Garvik Thresh and his crew sat in the back corner .5 Cranthery, each one built like a military transport vehicle. They controlled protection rackets across half the Terminus belt, and they were not known for being gentle. Thresh himself was the worst .3 meters tall, covered in armored plates, and possessing the emotional maturity of a small asteroid. He noticed the humans that of course he did. Humans were still rare. Curiosity always attracted attention. Unfortunately, Thresh had the survival instincts of a suicidal insect. That he stood up. HEY, he shouted across the bar. Tiny pink thing. You lost. The human didn't even turn around, just kept drinking that. I sighed quietly. This was going to end badly. Thresh and his crew marched across the bar, heavy footsteps shaking the floor. .5 massive bodies surrounding one small human. Thresh stood behind him, towering over him. I'm talking to you. Meet Sack. The human slowly turned, looked up at the towering Cranthery. I heard you. Then why didn't you answer? I didn't hear a question, the human said calmly. Just noise. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A Threxia nearby immediately moved to another table. Smart creatured, Thresh face plates darkened. That was a bad sign. You think you're funny, human? I think you're standing too close. The human sighed. Like this entire situation was just inconvenient. Thresh leaned forward. Or what? The human lifted his drink slightly. Or you'll make me spill this. And then I'll be annoyed. Thresh reached out, one huge hand grabbing for the human's shoulder. What happened next? I still replay in my mind, because even after seeing it with my own eyes, I barely believe it. The human moved, not fast, not by human standards I later learned, but fast enough he slipped under the grab, twisted sideways, and drove his elbow into a pressure point in Thresh's arm. Thresh screamed out a deep, shocked roar. His arm spasmed uncontrollably. The human moved again, a sweep of the legs. Perfect balance. Perfect timing. Physics to the rest. 300 kilos of angry Cranthery crashed into the floor. The impact rattled every bottle behind the bar. The other 4 crew members froze. I froze. The human calmly picked up his drink, checked the glass, then took another sip. Told you, he said quietly. I'd be annoyed if you spilled it. Thresh groaned on the ground, trying to understand what had just happened. One of his crew members, a younger Cranthery named Dax, reacted first. He pulled a plasma cutter from his belt. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, human. The human tilted his head slightly. That seems statistically unlikely. I made a lot of mistakes. Dax raised the weapon, but before he could fire, the human's hand flicked forward. Something metallic flashed through the air. A knifed IT slammed directly into the weapon's power cell. The plasma cutter sparked violently, then died. No energy weapons in my bar. I shouted automatically, house rules. The human looked at me. My apologies. I'll clean up. You better, I muttered. The remaining crew members growled. You're dead. And they rushed him, all 4 to AT once. That was their second mistake. That I've seen hundreds of bar fights. They're usually messy, chaotic, full of shouting and broken furniture. But what happened next was not a bar fight. That IT was precision violence. The human moved through them like water through cracks in stone. Every movement had purpose. Every strike landed exactly where it needed to. He redirected their weight, used their momentum against them. Hit weak points in their armor with surgical accuracy. AN. Elbow to a throat. A knee to a joint. A strike to a nerve cluster. They tried to surround him. He kept moving, never stopping, never hesitating, turning their numbers into a disadvantage. The entire fight lasted maybe 90 seconds. When it ended, all 5 Cranthery were on the ground, groaning, bleeding, questioning their life choices. The human brushed dust off his jacket, checked his drink, still full, then sat back down at the bar. The entire establishment was silent. He looked at me. Could I get some water? Hydration is important. I poured the water. My hand was shaking. What are you? He shrugged. Just a guy having a drink. I stared at the 5 unconscious criminals on my floor. No, I said slowly. You are definitely not just a guy. The human thought about that. Fair point. He held out his hand. My name is Jack Sullivan, and I'm looking for someone.